Liverpool hold a 5-point advantage still after the weekend action, despite an 8-0 win by Manchester City over Watford, racking up their goal difference. That's maybe going to come into play later down the line. There's a long way to go. Let's just look, though, Ali, as we take a look at the results from this season compared to last.
Okay.
Liverpool, exactly how they started last season. 6 wins out of 6, 18 points on the table. Manchester City, they're 3 points worse off. Maybe more worrying, Liverpool have beaten Chelsea at Stamford Bridge, which they failed to do last year, only getting a draw.
Okay.
Manchester City, a loss against Norwich. They picked up a draw against the previous champions of the Championship the year before in their away fixture. And they've also dropped points against Tottenham in a game that they won last year. So where's it all gone wrong for Manchester City in the early season?
Well, I love it how you're projecting what's going to happen this year comparing to what those same results were last year.
Yeah, I love it. Let's just extrapolate last season and not even bother playing this year.
Yes. And how Norwich all of a sudden comes into the...
They're now Wolves.
Into the conversation. Woo! Well, the difference right now between Liverpool and Manchester City, or really I should say between Manchester City of today and Manchester City of last season at this point, is the fact that you have no center backs. And those that you have available is, my goodness... it's a prayer, really. You're thinking about Otamendi, and it's a mistake waiting to happen, and it's gonna happen. The mistake is gonna happen. It's just a matter of when it happens and whether it hurts you. And because you don't have those guys available, you don't have Stones available. Your company's obviously moved on, and Laporte is injured. You find yourself with Fernandinho back there, and so people might say, "Well, they still beat Watford 8-0." Yes, they did, and it could have been a whole lot worse, and it should have been much worse than that. However, early on in that game, and we've talked about it, there was a chance by Gerard Deulofeu when it was 1-0 Manchester City. And it was so easy for Watford with one ball to beat everybody and Deulofeu to go on a 1v1 situation where now Ederson has to come up with a save to keep it at 1-0. So even in a game that you could have won 15-0, you still gave up quality chances. So as frail as Watford was in that game, and as awful as they were, and as great as you were offensively, you still gave up opportunities defensively. Which then tells you, if we're going to extrapolate, well, let's fully extrapolate, when you play, say a Liverpool, man, they're going to expose those frailties too. And the frailties are there for Manchester City. They're clear to see that the center back situation is a big, big question. And what you're doing in the left back position is also a big, big question. Mendy got 45 minutes in that game against Watford. Didn't look exactly all that great. You're bringing Fernandinho back as a center back. Well, that means that you're taking him out of the midfield. What does that do? And we seem to believe that Rodrigo is the answer, and that he's just going to take that position along, and he's going to be the one that plays that defensive role out of the midfield. Well, that's great. But Fernandinho's work rate will be missed somewhere. And since you're going to have him in the back line, that work rate is not going to be out of the midfield. That's where the defensive concerns are, and that's where the frailties are. And you can't do anything if you're Manchester City other than ride it with what you have and depend on your possession, on you controlling the games, on you controlling the rhythm, and you controlling the pace with which the game is played. You do enough of that, you frustrate other teams, force them to defend deeper in their own half, then it's going to be a whole lot more difficult for them to come and attack you. Having said that, Watford did have opportunities. So Manchester City, again, that's the area that we all know. That's the difference between where they were now, or where they are now, as to where they were last year.
Notwithstanding the importance of recognising this is only 6 games into a season, right?
Yeah.
There is something slightly different about Liverpool this year. Don't you get that feeling that they've come off that Champions League win with an intensity and a groove and almost a swagger, which is professional by its nature? They've carried it into the league season, where at the moment they seem unbeatable. Is that overstretching the fact that they've only played 6 games? Obviously, they've got a tough road ahead of them in the next few games before these two meet on November the 10th. Do you think that over the next few games, this Liverpool side is going to be sufficiently tested that they come in with daylight between themselves and City?
Well, here's the thing. They're perfect so far, Liverpool, but they haven't been perfect out on the field, as evidenced by their defeat against Napoli in Champions League. So there's been some issues for Liverpool, and even in this past weekend against Chelsea, where they were so good for long stretches of time, and then there were moments in which they seemed to get either distracted or disinterested or whatever it may have been, and in the attacking half they started making decisions that didn't quite make sense, and then picking passes that weren't quite there, and doing flick-ons when the simple ball would have been good enough, and they could have had an opportunity to just finish Chelsea off. Instead, they allowed Chelsea back in the game. In one of these games that they have ahead of that matchup against Manchester City, they may run into a team that has one of those days where everything that they touch is perfect. And in that very sequence is where Liverpool has to be at their very best. I don't think that they've been at their very best early on this season. They are perfect. They looked impressive, but they're not as clean as the record shows. And if they're not careful, if they get caught up in the numbers, if they get caught up in people telling them how good they have been, if they get caught up in the idea that yes, we are perfect, we are great, we're fantastic, we're awesome, we're the best, you may just give away points and just may give Manchester City some light. Right now, this is a title race that is very early on, but it's Liverpool's to lose because they look a whole lot better than Manchester City does defensively. They're perfect right now. They're 5 points ahead. There doesn't seem to be a reason as to why Liverpool would come back to Manchester City. However, you give Manchester City a chance, and they're going to take it, just like they did at the end of last season.
Yeah, those games with Leicester, Manchester United and Tottenham appearing on the landscape for Liverpool before Man City. How confident are you that Liverpool will go through without dropping points?
Yeah, it's a tough stretch, and it may just be that you drop points perhaps in the place that you didn't feel you would, which in this case may be Manchester United. Manchester United right now seems wobbly, seems like they're taking one step forward and 2 steps back. So they would seem the most vulnerable team of those three, and yet it may be the most dangerous game because there's a rivalry there, because there's a history there, because you're playing at Old Trafford. Whatever the case may be, maybe you get a full-strength Manchester United, which Ole Gunnar Solskjaer hasn't had this year. And if that's the case, then perhaps you get a true solid performance from Manchester United and one that troubles Liverpool. But those three matchups, back to back, it feels like that would be where Liverpool may just drop a couple of points here and there. And if they do that, then Manchester City has life. If they go clean, however, in those three, that is a very strong statement and one that I think Manchester City will notice as well.
That is the intriguing picture awaiting us with the 5-point gap, but a massive 5 games before these two come face to face in November. Keep it here at ESPN FC. You will not miss a beat with the title race.
Thanks so much for watching ESPN on YouTube, and for more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app, and for premium content and live streaming, subscribe to ESPN Plus.